Midterms are almost always tough for the sitting president's party, especially when that president is unpopular and economic conditions are unfavorable. These factors have Republicans worried about a potential wipeout come November of 2026. That said, it's actually Democrats who are staring down a difficult Senate map. Of the 35 Senate seats up for election next November, 5 are in states Kamala Harris won by single-digit margins: New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. And the biggest challenge? Defending 2 seats in states Trump carried in 2024, Michigan and Georgia. On the Republican side, the terrain is much friendlier. Only one GOP-held seat is in a state Harris carried, Susan Collins' seat in Maine, and North Carolina is the only other competitive GOP seat held in a state Trump won by a single-digit margin. For those reasons, Democratic hopes of flipping the upper chamber, even in a massive blue wave, are unlikely. They have a much better chance of taking back the House. Nevertheless, let's fill out this map here to see where each party has an opportunity to make gains. Of course, many Senate seats are safely in one party's column. For Democrats, there's little reason to worry about Oregon, where incumbent Jeff Merkley is seeking a 4th term. Merkley won each of his last 2 elections by more than 15 points, and there's no indication that 2026 will be any different. I also expect John Hickenlooper to comfortably win re-election in Colorado, which he said will be his final term in the Senate. First elected in 2018 after serving 2 terms as governor, Hickenlooper benefits from the fact that Colorado has trended further to the left than any other state over the past decade. Illinois is a bit more of a question mark. We still don't know whether Senate Whip Dick Durbin will seek a 6th term, and many Illinois Democrats are already preparing for the possibility that he won't. Still, even if Durbin steps aside, it's very unlikely that Republicans will field a strong enough candidate to flip the seats, especially in what's expected to be a favorable national environment for Democrats. Finally, in the Northeast, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, and Virginia are all safe Democratic holds, with incumbents expected to run for re-election in each state. New Jersey did trend significantly toward Trump in the 2024 presidential race, but it remains a fundamentally Democratic-leaning state, and the incumbent Cory Booker is very popular. And while Virginia was also decided by a single-digit margin in 2024, incumbent Mark Warner is signaling he intends to run for a 4th term, in which case the only thing that could make this race competitive is if outgoing Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin throws his hat in the ring. On the other side, Republicans have a significantly higher number of safe states. Before we go through them, though, if you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. When's the last time you checked on your home title? That's the legal proof you own your house. If you're like me, the answer is never. The problem is, in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, your home title has been transferred out of your name. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property. You won't even know it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. That's why you need to stop what you're doing and find out today if you're already a victim. Use promo code EP at home, titlelock.com, to make sure your title is still in your name. You'll also get a free title history report, plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HomeTitleLock.com now. Use promo code EP. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code EP. Alrighty, now for the Republicans, the only retirement we know of thus far is Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, but that won't matter as Kentucky is one of the reddest states in the nation. Together, these 16 states lift the Republican seat total up to 47, just 3 shy of retaining their majority, considering J.D. Vance holds the tie-breaking vote as vice president. There is an outside chance that the races in Alaska, Kansas, South Carolina, or Florida could become more competitive, especially in a big blue wave year. However, with former Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola now expected to run for governor in Alaska instead of the Senate, incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan should have a clear path to re-election. Similarly, with Kansas's outgoing Democratic Governor Laura Kelly making it clear she is absolutely not running for another office, incumbent Republican Roger Marshall should cruise as well. In South Carolina, Lindsey Graham should also have a smoother path than he did in 2020, when he still won by 10 points despite facing Jamie Harrison, who raised more money than any U.S. Senate candidate in history. And in Florida, as long as newly appointed Senator Ashley Moody wins the Republican nomination, the GOP should have little trouble holding the seat. Moody has overperformed in both of her previous statewide races for Attorney General. That leaves just 11 states without a rating. Each of the remaining races are either expected to be competitive or carry enough uncertainty that a safe rating would be too premature at this stage. Let's start in New Mexico, one of 5 Senate seats Democrats are defending in states Kamala Harris carried by single digits in 2024. I actually came close to placing this one in the safe blue column, but for now I'm keeping it as just likely. Ironically, incumbent Democrat Ben Ray Lujan's relatively low profile might actually work in his favor. An average Democrat should win this race by at least 5 points, and with no strong Republican challenger currently in the mix, this seat is very likely to remain in Democratic hands. And then there's Texas. Once again, it teased Democrats. Before slapping them in the face, Texas saw the 6th largest Republican swing between 2020 and 2024, backing Trump by 14 points, and effectively dashing any hopes Democrats had of unseating 4-term Republican Senator John Cornyn here in 2026. That said, if Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton successfully mounts a primary challenge against Cornyn, things could get a lot more interesting. Paxton brings a mountain of baggage with him, most notably being impeached for fraud and misconduct. Up in Nebraska, incumbent Republican Pete Ricketts is running for his first full term in the Senate. He's not especially popular, even within his own party, and there's a chance that Dan Osborne could mount another independent campaign after coming within 7 points of Deb Fischer last November. For now, this race stays in the likely Republican column. Over in Iowa, I also considered putting it in the safe Republican category, but with the potential for tariffs to hit the agriculture industry and the broader working class over the next year and a half, I'm holding it at likely for now. Up in Minnesota, Democrat Tina Smith has announced she won't seek a second term, making this the first U.S. Senate race in the state without an incumbent since 2006, the same year Republicans last won a federal election in Minnesota. Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan currently appears to have the edge in the Democratic primary, with Congresswoman Angie Craig seen as the next most likely contender. On the Republican side, the most prominent name so far is former NBA player Royce White, but he just lost to Amy Klobuchar by 16 points in 2024. Unless Republicans manage to recruit a stronger candidate, Flanagan, or whoever the Democrats nominate, should win comfortably. Sticking with the Great Lakes region, let's head over to Michigan, where 2-term Democrat Gary Peters is retiring. This one poses a much bigger challenge for Democrats, especially after losing the state in the 2024 presidential race. While Alyssa Slotkin narrowly held on to Debbie Stabenow's open seat last cycle, she did so by just 20,000 votes. Now, former Congressman Mike Rogers, who came close to winning that race, is expected to enter the 2026 contest any day now. On the Democratic side, Pete Buttigieg has opted not to run, leaving the party without a national name in the field, unless Rashida Tlaib jumps in, which many Democrats would probably prefer to avoid. So far, State Senator Mallory McMorrow is the only candidate to officially enter the race, though she's far from a guaranteed nominee. With all of that in mind, I've got Michigan in the toss-up column for now. That said, unless Democrats nominate someone deeply unpopular, I'd give them a slight edge, especially since the 2026 environment is expected to lean in their favor. Down in Ohio, we're looking at a special election to fill the remainder of the Senate term vacated by Vice President J.D. Vance. Republican Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Husted to replace Vance, and Husted is expected to run as an unelected incumbent. On the Democratic side, former Congressman Tim Ryan has expressed interest in running. He previously lost to Vance in the 2022 Senate race. There's also speculation that newly ousted Senator Sherrod Brown could attempt a comeback after losing his fourth-term bid to Republican Bernie Moreno by about 3.5 points. According to the latest prediction market odds, Brown and Ryan each have about a 40% chance of securing the Democratic nomination. Given Ohio's strong Republican lean and Houston's status as a relatively moderate, mainstream Republican, the GOP holds the clear advantage regardless of the Democratic nominee. However, if Brown enters the race, we may see it inch closer and closer to toss-up territory. Moving down the Atlantic coastline, we come to the two highest-profile races of the cycle, North Carolina and Georgia. There's a good chance that when we look back on 2026, these two contests will define which party came out on top. If Democrats can flip the North Carolina seat and hold Georgia, it will likely coincide with flipping the House, putting a halt to Trump's agenda and setting them up nicely for 2028. On the other hand, if Republicans hold North Carolina and flip Georgia, it would empower Trump further and mark yet another disappointing cycle for the Democrats. In North Carolina, Republican Thom Tillis is expected to seek a third term, though he may face a primary challenge. The state's Republican Party censured Tillis over his bipartisan support for gun control and same-sex marriage, and for a time, former RNC co-chair Lara Trump was floated as a potential challenger. On the Democratic side, outgoing Governor Roy Cooper is widely expected to enter the race, which would be a best-case scenario for Democrats. Cooper maintained strong approval ratings throughout his 2 terms, has built-in name recognition, and comes with a well-established fundraising network. He's even led Tillis in both polls surveying this race so far, one by 4 points and the other by just 1. If it comes down to Tillis versus Cooper, expect an extremely close race. In Georgia, incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff is running for a second term. He was first narrowly elected in a runoff back in 2021, unseating Republican incumbent David Perdue by about a point. Now in 2026, outgoing Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who is term limited, is widely seen as the front-runner for the GOP nomination. Like Cooper, Kemp would be the strongest candidate Republicans could field for this race, and arguably the strongest non-incumbent in the entire country this cycle. That's why most analysts consider Ossoff the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent in 2026. That said, Georgia saw one of the smallest pro-Republican shifts in the country between the 2020 and 2024 presidential elections, similar to North Carolina. Both states are experiencing slow but steady demographic trends favoring Democrats, with rapidly growing and diversifying urban areas attracting large numbers of college-educated voters from liberal pockets in the West and Northeast. Still, Kemp's strength as a candidate likely outweighs Ossoff's incumbency advantage, leaving the fundamentals effectively even. This race is a toss-up with the outcome heavily dependent on the national environment. In New Hampshire, Democratic incumbent Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and Congressman Chris Pappas is the first to enter the race to succeed her. He's likely to remain the most prominent Democrat in the field, but that's not necessarily good news for the party. Former Republican Governor Chris Sununu has publicly expressed interest in running, and if he does, this race would probably tilt toward Republicans, despite New Hampshire's Democratic lean and the potential for a blue wave. Sununu is just that strong of a candidate. In 2020, he won re-election by over 30 points, even as Joe Biden carried the state by 7. But even if Sununu opts out, Republicans have another strong potential candidate in former Senator Scott Brown, who's also expressed interest in running. Either Republican would likely be stronger than Pappas on paper, but because of the state's Democratic lean, I'm keeping New Hampshire in the toss-up column for now. Finally, in Maine, incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins remains a political unicorn. Back in 2020, nearly every poll and analyst predicted her defeat. Yet Collins defied expectations, beating Democrat Sarah Gideon by about 8 points. And she did it on the same ballot where Joe Biden carried Maine by roughly 9. She's still the only Republican to win a Senate race in a state carried by the Democratic presidential nominee since 2004. Now, as the only Republican-held Senate seat in a state Kamala Harris won in 2024, this is widely considered Democrats' best pickup opportunity in 2026. The prediction market Kalshi currently gives gives Democrats a slight edge, with a 51% chance of unseating Collins, effectively making this race a toss-up. Democrats' strongest potential challenger is Congressman Jared Golden, who has consistently won re-election in Maine's more conservative, rural 2nd District, a district Trump has carried in 3 straight presidential elections. This is one of those races where the candidate will make all the difference. If Golden jumps in and secures the nomination, Collins will be in serious trouble. But if he doesn't, there's still a real chance she scrapes by yet again. For now, Maine stays in the toss-up column. So that brings us to a projected 51 to 44 Republican advantage, with 5 toss-ups left to determine which party leaves the 2026 cycle feeling optimistic about the road ahead. Now I get it, leaving you with 5 toss-ups on a prediction channel might feel a little unsatisfying. So if you asked me to go with my gut, here's how I see it right now. I'd give Democrats the edge in Maine, New Hampshire, Michigan, and North Carolina, while Republicans likely have the upper hand in Georgia. That's just my read based on the current national environment and early candidate dynamics. But as always, it's still early, and things can change quickly. As always, feel free to share your thoughts on this map in the comments and suggest any other videos or topics you'd like me to cover. That's it for today's video. Shout out to my channel members listed in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the content. Check out more of my videos here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.